Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? I guess we have this small group going on right now this morning, right? I think it's so awesome how God puts things together. When you think about it, what's a huddle? Right? A huddle is a small group of people getting together to do something. My dream is to have huddles all over the North American division, making a difference for Jesus Christ. And that's what small groups are able to do. This morning, I want to share with you a couple of things that will help you make your small group ministry intentional. I love what Deirdre was saying, that it needs to be intentional. Without intentionality, it's just another club, another activity that we're doing. And the most beautiful thing is to realize that it works. I've been able to work with this in every single context with different ethnic groups and see God doing amazing things. One of the first times I used it was with a small group of about 25 members in my congregation that lets us into a 400-member church. And that was because of the work of small groups. It's transformative. It's something beautiful. And so I want to share these principles with you to help you understand what are some basic things. And when you're intentional and you convey this to your congregation, you'll see people with a new view, a new understanding of what small groups are all about. Because one of the challenges that we have is the idea that many have about what small groups are. So if you are able to cast it with a different vision, help your church family understand that it comes from the words of Jesus Christ, then it will be transformative. Notice this, we have the gospel commission, and Jesus Christ very clearly tells us, and Jesus came and spoke with them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And as many churches actually may repeat this on a Sabbath morning or know this by heart, how many of us are practicing it? What I want to propose to you is that when we follow Jesus' directive, we're actually doing something that will be transformative for the church. Why? Because we realize Jesus Christ said it with all authority. It is His plan. And I love this because when we are not doing it, we're not doing His plan, we're being disobedient. The next thing is that He sends us to go. And one of the challenges we have in Adventism is that our members do not know how to mingle. Do you know that? It's one of the challenges we have. They do not know how to mingle. And the groups that I've led, very often the idea is that, okay, we're going to get a group of us. No. It's not about us. It's about sharing the gospel with others. When He said go, He was telling us to go and mingle, which is one of the powerful things that will help our church family realize is more than just about us. And then He said, make disciples, baptize them, teach them. What is that? That is a discipleship path. One of the things that we're missing in so many of our church families and so many of our church members' hearts. And so when you launch it with these ideas, you realize that you're creating the perfect platform for small groups. In my opinion, discipleship and small groups go together. You don't do one without doing the other because it really reflects on Jesus Christ's plan for the church. And so when we do that, we see that Jesus Christ said to the disciples, go and make disciples. Go. How did the disciples do the going? How did they go? And the beautiful thing is reflected in the book of Acts. When you go to the book of Acts, chapters 1 through 5, you get some of the most basic principles that come from or for the small group ministry. And there's so many passages through the book of Acts that I could share with you, but I want to share it from chapter 2 and the verses 41 through 47, where it says the following. Then those who gladly received His word were baptized, and that day about 3,000 souls were added to them. So the church suddenly becomes big. What a problem. How do you solve this problem? Well, they continue steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, in breaking bread and in prayers. Then fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. When the church is following God's plan, you start to see God's mighty works. in the church family. You start to see it through the small groups, how God does incredible miracles. Miracles that, for instance, in my group right now, one of my groups, we have a Muslim who is joining our group, is so interested in what he's learning. We decided to start studying the book of Genesis. And within the first 3 chapters, he had most of the doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine. And his eyes were just wide open saying, I never knew any of those things. It's amazing to see how God is able to transform people through this. He goes on to say, now all who believe were together and had all things in common, sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. You start to see the church family caring for one another, caring for the community where they are, caring for the needs of each other and making a difference for God's kingdom. So continue daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house. They ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart and praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. So through the break of small groups, through the multiplication of small groups, the church was growing tremendously. And we see the numbers that were amazing when it came to those early days of the Christian church. And through the rest of the early church, the history of the early church, small groups were a very important part of it. So what comes out of those verses that we just read? And we find out that these are key elements for a culture of mission, of outreach in the small group. And I want to propose to you that very often the fact that some of these elements are missing is the fact that many of the small groups don't work out. I hear so many people say, oh, we tried, it didn't work. Oh, we tried, it didn't work. And you start asking questions, and actually what they have become was just small little cliques, just small little clubs that made them happy because they came together, held hands, sang kumbaya, and then they went home. But they didn't make a difference for God's kingdom because they were missing some elements. What are these 4 basic elements? Number 1, discipleship. Discipleship happens when you are doing a small group ministry. Discipleship happens because now you're teaching each other, you're practicing the key principles of discipleship, unity, teaching, and multiplication, which come as a result of the ministry of the small groups. So that's why I say discipleship and small groups go together, hand by hand. The next thing that happens is koinonia. I love that word. Can you say it with me? Koinonia? Koinonia is fellowship, is relationships, is intimacy that happens when the church starts to realize that through the small groups, they're there for each other. Someone gets sick. About a year ago, I have 2 small groups that I'm part of, and we follow these principles. And about a year ago, I suffered an accident, lose the use of my leg, and some other things happened. Was bedridden for a couple of weeks, and I loved it. How now the small groups were taking care of this man. My wife will say, I'm embarrassed. I will say, no, this is the life of the small group. They call me, they send me messages, they send us food, and the same happens with anyone that is in need in this group, as well as reaching out to those in the community. And it's amazing how God can transform that because of the fellowship that happens. In many of our churches, people do not really know each other. Did you know that? People really don't know each other. They show up about 9:30 or 10, sometimes 10:30, go home by 12:30, and that's it. They don't form relationships. But when they're part of a small group, they start to know each other and care for one another. What's the next thing that happens? Service. They start to serve one another. That was characteristic of the early church, and it was manifested through the small group ministry. And of course, the most important one, because that's how the groups multiply, is through soul winning. And that, my friends, is what makes the difference. Now, one of the beautiful things that happens is leadership development through the small group. When you have a church where the Pareto principle is acting out, where you got 20% of people doing 80% of the work, and you start to emphasize a small group, and people start to get activated in small groups, now you start to develop leadership. And this is what happens beautifully. I don't want you to focus too much on the titles that I have here that I'm going to present to you. We have the leader, we have the leader in training, etc., all these different positions that are part of a plan for leadership development. So, whatever you want to call this title, the idea is that people start to develop responsibilities within the small group. And because of that, you start to develop leadership in the church in general. So it makes a powerful difference. And to keep the groups missional, one key element is to have that empty chair. That empty chair that reminds them constantly that there is a need to be bringing others, to make connections with the community and inviting the community. One of the beautiful things about the church, the small group ministry, is that really forms the church without walls. How many of you would like to have a church that doesn't have any walls? And I don't mean, walls like this. Well, the powerful thing about the small group ministry is that it places your church in the neighborhood where your members are. And that's the church without walls. It's the church that is connecting with the community directly and making a difference for God's kingdom. So 3 key elements that come out of this intentionality are the following. You have a leader that is missional, that is thinking about how to expand that ministry and is creating leadership positions within the group, and that keeps a DNA of multiplication in the group. You keep that empty chair, and by the way, it translates to any kind of small groups. Is it a bike riding group? Oh, great. Then have an empty bicycle. Is it a knitting club? Whatever you want to call it, whatever kind of ministry, is the idea that you are there for more than just the members. You are there to share the good news with others. And that keeps the group with that mission-minded element that is so important. And that when we don't have these elements, the discipleship, the koinonia, the service, the evangelism, when they're missing, then you just have another group, another club. But when you have those 4 elements and you're doing the training and helping the church develop through these elements, then there is an intentionality and the groups are making a difference in the community. And I should have said, let me go back for a moment. It doesn't go back. It goes to the numbers game. Yes, to the numbers game. Because one of the questions I often ask is, how many do you need to get started? And the answer is 3 is enough to get started. With 3 people, you get started. Sometimes you start with 2, then recruit another one. But it's intentionality that through this group, you start to share the good news, train leaders for future groups development, multiplication. The first goal for a group should be 12. And why 12? Well, Jesus had 12 disciples. But one of the things that happens is that when you get to that 12, then you have a group that is strong enough to multiply. I don't like to use the word divide. I like to use the word multiply, because as the group is growing, each one of the members is being developed into future leaders. And as the group gets to that 12, now it becomes strong. I recommend that between 12 and 16, you start to think about how are you going to multiply. You have a key leader that has been training an assistant leader, someone that is helping her develop that vision and transfer that vision of multiplication. And by the time you get to 16, now is a perfect time for multiplication. Now you have 6, 8 people that can go into a new neighborhood and start sharing this excellent system that God gives us for us to be working with the small groups. And then people tell me, well, my small group is 20 people. I tell them, no, that's not a small group. That is a small church, right? And then it goes into 25 and 30, and they don't want to give. They don't want to leave because they're having such a good time. It's because they have lost their vision. They have lost that DNA of multiplication. But when you have that culture of multiplication, training your leaders, training them to develop leaders. If a disciple makes disciple, a leader does what? Makes leaders, right? And through the small group, you start doing that leadership developments cast the vision for multiplication. And when they get to 16, they already have a new leader ready to take off and start a new group. And this is transformative, my friends. And so instead of getting to 20, you get to 16, between 16 and 20, you're ready to cast a new group and launch the vision. And my friends, it's beautiful. In one of my groups, in the Friday evening group, where this person that I mentioned to you that is Muslim is part of it, we're already having 2 babies. We're having two babies because it is a mixed group where we have young adults, we have older adults, and even some teenagers. And some of the young adults said, you know what, we need another group. And they're starting a new group. I'm excited about it because it's truly small groups living the life of multiplication that God gave us when Jesus Christ said, go and make disciples. I pray that as you go energized and excited about ministry and the small group ministries, you cast that vision of multiplication that will make a powerful difference for God's kingdom. God bless you.